Hi, this is Tara McGillicuddy, host of ADHD Support Talk Radio, and we will be back with some brand new episodes beginning in 2018, but we are rebroadcasting some of our more popular episodes from ADHD Support Talk Radio over the years. And today I'm re-releasing a podcast episode with Dr. Ari Tuckman about ADHD and New Year's resolutions. I also want to remind you that ADHD Support Talk Radio is sponsored by ADDclasses.com. Sign up now for a free webinar at www.addclasses.com.
With that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tuckman to the show.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to do these things with you, Tara.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. And, we just thought just talk about New Year's resolutions and people with ADD. I know you and I, for the past couple of years, were both leaders on the Facebook ADHD Allies. And I know last year I wrote an article about New Year's resolutions. It's always a big topic. So maybe just start out with, should people with ADD make New Year's resolutions? Do they work? I mean, what are your thoughts on New Year's resolutions?
My first thought about it is the first two words of New Year's resolutions. In other words, New Year, why do we have to wait until the new year? I mean, okay, fine, it's a time of rebirth and regeneration and all that. So, I know why we do. But still, I guess the issue that I have with New Year's resolutions is that we shouldn't have to wait until the new year, number one, to, make the changes. But number two is that I think that the reason why a lot of New Year's resolutions don't stick is that there's this feeling of I should do this or I should do this now. So it becomes this kind of artificial timeline. And if you do something that might be the right thing, but it's at the wrong time, it's not likely to work for you. So the first thing I would say here is if you are going to make some resolutions in your life, I think, first of all, that's great. But ask yourself, is this really the right time to do it? And if the answer is no, truly, honestly, no, great. Wait until it is. And if it is the right time, then I think having asked yourself that question and really kind of wrestled with it a little bit, and you come to, yes, this is the time, I think then you're even more committed to it and even more likely to stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's really some built-in pressure about, making resolutions, making changes on, January 1st. And we're, recording this on January 4th, and I'm sure people who are listening to it live, people who are listening to it later are probably saying, oh, my gosh, it's January 15th, and I haven't made a New Year's resolution. And, there's some shame in that, and there's also that added pressure that everyone's doing it. Yeah, I should do it because everyone else is doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's really more, and I think when it comes to making resolutions, I think it's important to recognize that you're going to slip and the goal is to get back on. That, rare is the resolution that's perfect out of the gate, that you might need to adapt it a little bit, or, just that, like I said, that you slip and you just need to get back on.
Mm-hmm. And then, I look at it that, at the new beginning, it might be a good time to make changes because a lot of us with Christmas and Thanksgiving, we just, went crazy, eating, drinking. So, sometimes it is a good time for people. I mean, I make changes. I have changes I'm going to make in the new year, but I'm not really identifying them as New Year's resolutions. It's a good time for me because it's a new beginning. It's, the holidays are over. The holidays are stressful. But I'm not calling them resolutions. They probably are resolutions, but for me it helps to call them something else.
Right. And that's fine. I mean, if that little mental trick helps you, I don't care what you call them, as long as you're doing good stuff in your life. And, for my part, sort of in the interest of self-disclosure, one of my sort of resolutions is I need to cut down my caffeine. Now, I would happily drink 1,000 cups of coffee a day if I thought it wasn't bad for me. But, I'm trying to limit that. I'm trying actually to do sort of a slow taper of weaning myself off of caffeine because I know a fast taper to just cold turkey it, forget it. I need to be functional in my day. I can't, take a week of being asleep and miserable. So sometimes you need to take it slow as far as these resolutions go. The other thing is, my New Year's resolution, I blew it the first day, like literally New Year's Day, and then the day after that, and the day after that. And I would like to say, in my defense, that I blame it. We got a puppy, and he woke us up in the middle of the night 3 times, so it's all his fault that I blew my New Year's resolution. But this morning, I'm back on track. I'm sort of on my slow taper. So, rather than just sort of give up and say, well, forget it, can't do it, not going to happen, it's better to get back on track, and it's more about sort of looking at the bigger picture. So, like, if your resolution is to work out more, then, and, there's a crazy week at work or there's a demotivated week and you just don't make it, fine. There's 1 week that's gone, but get back on it today or get back on it tomorrow, and then in total by the end of the year, you'll have had more workouts than if you didn't. Or if your goal is to be organized, that more of the time you're organized, even if there are still some times that it kind of slides back into chaos, but that overall more of your time this year has been organized versus, has been more organized versus less organized.
Now, one thing I found with myself and, clients is that a lot of times it's not that the resolution itself doesn't work. It's we just come out with, okay, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. All we think about is the end result, and a lot of times we don't have a plan, or the plan that we use really doesn't work, and just get frustrated. And like you said, with the coffee, the first day of the year, you didn't, do your New Year's resolution. But a lot of people with ADD might just say, okay, I blew it on the first day, why even bother? So, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of stress that can, really get into the New Year's resolutions with people with ADD.
Yeah, definitely it can. And, I think part of it is that there's kind of a natural reaction that when it feels like there's a number of things in our life that are really not where we want them to be, to kind of jump to the extreme or to take too ambitious a goal. And, I can respect that, but I think it's hard. Just the reality is, the more ambitious the goal, the less likely you are to stick with it in the long term. And if we're talking about kind of habit change, which is what most of these resolutions are about, it's really about not just achieving a goal, but then maintaining it. And, that's a different approach. It's kind of like, it's one thing if you need to lose weight so you can fit into a wedding dress where you have one specific day that you're shooting at. But really, those are very few of our resolutions. They're really more about overall, I'd like to do more of this or be less of that or whatever. So to take kind of the big picture when it comes to planning it out.
Yeah, I think we need to look at both, too. And I think a lot of times it's either we only look at the immediate, how to do something, or we look at that big goal. Like somebody might say, okay, I want to lose 100 pounds this year. And, you lose 10 pounds and there's still 90 more to go. And it can be really, overwhelming. And so, in that combination of, what is the big picture and what are the smaller goals, what are the steps in between to achieve it? I know myself, I need to look at both, and I need to balance it. If I only look at one, I do get really frustrated and say, why even bother?
Right. Yeah. And to give yourself some credit for the partial successes along the way. And to recognize that success or progress is rarely a straight line, that there's usually some up and down along the way. And just like you said, to balance the short term versus the long term. So, if your goal is to lose 20 pounds by, I don't know, I'll say June 1st or something, how many, let's break it down. How many is that, by February 1st, March 1st, April 1st, May 1st? And then within that, how many is it by January 15th, by February 15th, to sort of put these mid-goals in there so you know where you're at. Am I on target? Am I ahead? Am I behind? Because otherwise, to say 20 pounds by June 1st, it's too much time and it's too much weight. Like I don't know how to mentally divide that up, just keeping it in my head.
Yep. And then the bigger picture is, you want to lose 20 pounds by June 1st, but ultimately you want to be healthy, so looking at its lifestyle changes, it's eating right, it's sleeping, it's exercise, which not coincidentally, but those are what we're going to be talking about on the other shows this month. Next week, Rhonda Stone is going to be on, and we're going to be talking about how to maintain an exercise routine. The week after, Dr. Oliviero is going to be on, and we're talking about sleep. Linda Hilger is going to be on the end of the month, and we're going to be talking about organizing yourself to eat right. So, there's a lot of these things that, we need to do to be healthy to get the result, and, it's looking at that big picture and the small picture, and it's hard to go back and forth sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's, there's sort of an unfortunate irony here for everybody, but I think especially for folks with ADHD who struggle more with consistency and routines, is that, all these things that we're talking about, exercise, sleep, and organizing, it's one of those things that if you're doing those things well, you you need to be doing a lot of other things in your life well. Or to put it another way, if you're not managing those other details in your life, probably these are the things that begin to slip first. I'm too busy, I have too much to do, I can't get to bed on time, or I can't make it to the gym, or I should put this stuff away but I don't have time to do it, or I don't have the energy, or I just don't want to deal with it, or whatever. So unfortunately, when we talk about these kind of lifestyle changes or these habit changes, they don't just exist in isolation. It's not like, summer vacation in middle school where all you're doing is sitting around all day and, I'd like to work in half an hour at the gym a day. That's easy when you're at, 13 years old and you don't have a job and nothing to do for 2 months. But none of us have that luxury. So it's in the midst of my entire crazy life, how do I carve out an hour at the gym at least 3 times a week, or how do I make myself at the end of the day get put away all those odds and ends that have been taken out and still get to bed on time. So they're kind of a casualty of bigger trends in our lives, which I think in some ways it makes it all the more important to really kind of get on top of your ADHD, to understand it, to treat it. And that means finding people who understand ADHD in adults and not just sort of think they know about it because they know a couple things about it. To find a good treatment team and really maximize what you're doing with your ADHD so that these other things fall into place. And I've even said that, we can use your success in these areas of like sleep and organization and eating well and exercise and all. Like if you're doing good on that stuff, that's a marker, that's a measure that you're probably doing pretty good overall in your life.
Yep. It's amazing how everything's so connected. I mean, with sleep, if you don't get enough sleep, you're probably not going to eat well. If you don't get enough sleep, you might not feel well enough to exercise. But then, like, I'm somebody that if I can't sleep unless I get like 20 minutes a day of aerobic exercise. Like, so it's like all connected, and then the sleep affects everything else. And with ADHD, I mean, it's more important than for the average person to get, the right amount of sleep. And like you said, when you're doing well with those, you probably are managing the rest of your life well.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's just one of those things that in terms of sleep, exercise, and eating, that these things are sort of fundamental, that they won't necessarily make you better than you are, enable you to perform better than your abilities, but they'll at least enable you to perform at the best of your abilities. That, losing an hour or two of sleep, especially a couple nights in a row, a few nights in a row, no one performs at their best at that point. So you're all, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot before you even get out of bed, when you're not getting enough sleep or if you're not eating well. And, nutrition is not a treatment for ADHD. It is simply not. It doesn't work. But it does help to the extent that, any of us perform better when we have a healthy diet and we don't eat too much junk and all of that. So, I think it's worth striving for, even though it's certainly easier said than done. It's always quicker and easier to eat bad than it is to eat good.
And I think, like you said, it's really important that if we're thinking about making changes, making New Year's resolutions, whatever you want to call them, if you are listening to this and you have ADHD, that should probably be the first step, is treating your ADHD, managing your ADHD, like you said, finding the right type of help, the right type of professionals, maybe before you even, try to make those New Year's resolutions or even think about them.
Well, and another thing that I, often suggest, and I'm kind of going off of something, Tara, that you'd said a little earlier, is I have a saying, work the process and the product will follow. That, when we talk about resolutions, often what we're talking about is products, in the sense of the end result is I would like to lose this much weight or go to the gym this more times or be this much more organized or, get that better job or whatever, finish painting the bathroom, I don't know. That we talk about kind of end results, which, of course, that makes sense. Those are our goals. But I think that it's helpful to focus on the process. If that's my goal, what's my process of how to get there? And that means, really kind of practical, step-by-step, what am I actually going to do here? And how that then plays out. And when setbacks occur, how do I bounce back and get back on track? And what might those setbacks be? What's going to knock me off my game? And when it does, how do I get back on? So to plan ahead for those setbacks. If you focus on the process, you probably won't bat 1,000. There's going to be slips and there's going to be better days and worse days and whatever. But if overall you're focusing on the process and you're working a good process, it'll probably get you to your goal or at least close enough to it. So it's that, day by day by day. So like for me, we keep coming back to the obvious things of like, losing weight and exercising. One of the things for me is I'm lucky enough to have a Y like literally across the street from my office. So I go into my schedule and I put in, 3 days a week I block out an hour for the Y and I put it into my schedule beforehand because if I wait to put it in, I will never, ever get there. So that goes in first. I put it a month ahead or whatever so that I know I'm going to get there because that's the only way that works for me. Now, on the flip side of it, if I'm out presenting or at a conference or we're out of town or whatever and I miss a day or two, whatever, fine. It's not going to kill me to miss one or two. As long as the rest of the time I'm, pretty good about making sure that I get on over there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm focusing on this year is getting back into a regular exercise routine and just joined a gym. I'm actually going to do personal training. And my goal is to go there daily, but I live in New England, and we had a blizzard last week, and there's going to be chances that there's going to be snowstorms, or for whatever reason I can't get to the gym. So I'm thinking, both ways. Okay, ideally I'm going to try to go every day to the gym, but on the days where I can't get out of the house, like my car this week was stuck in the garage because they plugged it in, I couldn't go out. So I need to have a backup plan that there are things I can do at home. And I think that's something to really look at. You have that plan and also, what could go wrong. And that's something that I looked at ahead of time that could go wrong is, I won't be able to get there. And, whether it's losing weight, whether it's exercising, whatever else the resolution is, the product, the result is, with the process, life happens and there's going to be reasons or times when it's not going to work the way you expect it to.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's flexibility in that, the danger point in sticking to resolutions is that time that we get knocked off track, often for reasons that we can't control, like, a blizzard, for example, or just a, big week at work or a kid gets sick or whatever. The danger point is that getting knocked off and then not getting back on. And it doesn't happen intentionally. It's just that, tomorrow, and then it's so far from when you were on the program that you're like, well, forget it, or it just slips out of your awareness. So, so it's that staying with it that's the challenge. And, I think it can be helpful to sort of go ahead and, maybe if you have a schedule to put it in or to post up reminders or to tell some friends, hey, I'm doing this thing, do me a favor in a few weeks, ask me about it if you remember. And that way it kind of keeps it more at the front of your mind and doesn't allow it to just it doesn't allow life to just sort of slide it over to the side and then off your radar screen.
One thing I think we talked about at the beginning was a lot of times people choose resolutions because they should or don't really think about why they're doing it. I think that's it's very important to have an understanding of, why you're choosing this resolution, what's in it for you. Because I know I'm the type of person, I know a lot of ADD clients are like that too, that if I'm told to do something, that doesn't work for me. Like, I need to have a reason. I need to know the payoff. I need to buy into it. So I think it's important for people, if they're choosing a resolution or making changes, to really understand what's in it for them. Like, what's the reason behind it? How are they going to benefit from it?
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That, if you don't buy it, if you don't believe it, then it's really hard to make yourself do something you don't really want to do, or feels like you're doing it simply for somebody else. That's definitely, it's a setup for resentment on both people's part.
Definitely. Now, we have a few more minutes left, or towards the end of the call. Is there anything important you'd like to reiterate, or any final thoughts that you'd like to end with today?
I guess I would say, the saying I used before, if you work the process, the product will follow. So focus on the process, expect setbacks, and then get back on, get knocked off, get back on, and set reasonable goals, that it's better to achieve a lower goal than it is to feel like you fell short of a higher goal. And then I guess we hadn't talked about this before, but I'll throw it in now, is look at all of this as a learning process, that as you chug along through these things, you're going to learn from it. You're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn what works for you, what doesn't work for you. That's great. That's how it should be. So even your setbacks and failures are learning experiences. And if they prepare you to do it better the next time, I would call that a success. That, life is a process. It's not like you do it's all about like one shot and that's the only shot you get. I mean, life keeps going and the same situations keep coming up. So the goal is to continue to be improving. You'll never get to perfect, but hopefully continually improving. And if you can learn from that process and see it as a learning experience, first of all, you're more willing to take chances, which is good. And second of all, when you do stumble, you're more likely to get back up and keep going, which is really the most important thing.
Yeah, and we are going to stumble. And life itself is a bunch of trial and error,
Yeah.
Everybody learns. Everybody makes mistakes. And yeah, it's just making sure you're getting in that mindset where you understand that more than likely you're not going to do it right and perfect the first time, and looking at what did I do well this time, what part of it did work, okay, what part of it didn't work, what can I change, and I know for me that's been really important, looking at that instead of just looking at, oh my gosh, I screwed up again, I failed again, why even bother, and looking at it, what can I learn about myself, how can I improve this process.
Yeah, well, I mean, life is a moving target that even if you somehow manage to not change at all, life is changing. Your circumstance is changing. I mean, my life this year is not the same as my life last year. So, you have to change. You have to try new things. The more willing you are to take chances, what I should say is the more willing you are to fail and, to be able to dust yourself off and get back up, the more willing you'll be to take chances, and that's good chances, not sort of risky, impulsive chances, but, reasonable chances. I think that's really important.
Definitely. Life is about chances, and I think a lot of us with ADD, we've failed a lot, and it's hard to take those chances. But I think realizing that everyone takes them, and even if you don't get the exact results you want, you still do learn from them, and you do get something out of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, don't go jump off a cliff and be too impulsive, but take some chances.
Yeah, definitely. And, sort of a joke I have is, if nothing else, you got a funny story to tell at the end of it, that even doesn't work out. So.
Yep.
And, I mean, as sort of, I don't know, this is a little bit of a segue, but speaking of, funny stories, one of my favorite people in this sort of this small world of ADHD is Roberto Olivardi, who's going to be presenting, I guess, in a couple of weeks on ADHD and sleep. And, man, this is a guy he's got a lot of funny stories about things that he's done. And, I think one of the reasons why he's sort of so likable and also has been successful is that he has been willing to take some chances on things. And a lot of it worked out, some of it didn't, but he's definitely got some funny stories to tell about the stuff that didn't work out.
Yeah, I can't wait to have him on in a couple of weeks. He's going to be a great guest, and I think people are really going to get a lot out of him. The content and just him, his personality too. So it's definitely great. Before we end, I forgot. I know you've been on before. A lot of people are probably familiar with you, but of course my ADD got in the way, and I kind of forgot to introduce you, who you are. And so would you like to just tell people a bit about you and
Sure.
how they can get in contact with you and your books?
Well, I mean, you and I have done about 100 things together, so I'm not surprised that you forgot the intro. But so I'm a psychologist outside of Philadelphia, and I've written a couple books. One is Integrative Treatment for Adult ADHD, which is for clinicians, and then the other is More Attention, Less Deficit, Success Strategies for Adults with ADHD, and that's written for adults with ADHD or people who care about them. I also do a podcast. It used to be weekly. It's now about twice a month at this point. I've got 82 episodes, and actually I broke the 200,000 downloads mark just before the new year, so that's pretty cool. So you can, I know. So you can get information about all of this stuff as well as upcoming presentations and links to past presentations and all of that at my website, which is adultadhdbook.com.